Hello, my friends. Welcome to another episode of the Whole Health with Carney podcast. And on this episode, we have my friends Charlotte and Jonathan from Wellness Theory. And usually they're not tuning in from their current location, but they're tuning in from Thailand, which is, as you know, one of my favorite countries I've ever been to. Spent a lot of time there in 2017. They're originally from the UK. We had a great episode together on their show many months ago. So if you haven't checked that out, I will put that in the description box here. It'd be cool for you to listen to this episode, listen to that episode, and hear the growth that has happened in that point. So Charlotte and Jonathan have something called Wellness Theory, and I'm going to let them share a little bit about what that is. We're going to dive in because we got a good conversation ahead of us. So Charlotte and Jonathan, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you. It's so excited to be here, especially on your podcast now this time around. So we're excited to just share a bit about what we know, have a good conversation. And as you said, obviously we are Wellness Theory, and what that is a pretty much online coaching wellness platform that we started a few years ago. We decided to kind of merge both our skill sets together to bring an integrated kind of holistic view towards wellness, focusing on the physical, mental, and emotional sides of wellness, because we know when you focus on one and neglect the others, it just doesn't work. You're always going around in circles. So by integrating and marrying those two skill sets, that's when we created that magic and get that lasting change, which is what we're all about.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're bringing those skill sets together. It was interesting when we really dug deep into what are the major things that we've noticed over our years and years, because our background is very much the fitness space. And what we noticed, like one of the key things that held people back was a form of stress. Whether that's stress in their work life, whether that's personal stress, it just varies from person to person, obviously, as how it shows up. But what we found is that a lot of people were struggling with their overall well-being, and it was all coming back to that root cause, which is why that's what we do now, is we specialize in helping people get to the root cause of their stress through healthy, natural solutions.
I love it. And, it's funny you say that, because sometimes people look at me like I'm crazy and I say, I believe stress is the root cause of every disease in the human existence. Yeah. So sometimes people think that's a bold claim, but at the end of the day, like you mentioned, you can be doing all the right things. I'll put that in air quotes, all the right things of, exercising every day, eating healthy. But if you're stressed, you're causing an inflammatory response in your body. You're causing that sympathetic nervous system to be in overdrive. And if we can't get that stress down, like I mentioned, you can be doing all the right things, but you're not going to be seeing the results you want. And that's where I think dealing with stress can change everything. If we learn to manage our stress, we learn to actually learn how to rest, which is something I'm still working on, learn how to actually rest and not be go all the time. But that is such a key point. And that's what I think, last time we had a conversation, we just have a lot of alignment on that topic, because it is such an important piece that, especially in this digital age where we're staring at these screens all day, stress has become the norm, and it's almost become a badge of honor for a lot of people.
Yeah, for sure. A lot of people do wear that as a badge of honor. Yeah, you hear it all the time. People walk around going, I'm so stressed today. Right. Or when people, how are you today? Oh, I'm stressed. They said, no, you're not stressed. And I think we need to get out of this whole stigma of stress is a bad thing, and start to really, instead of trying to manage our stress and thinking, okay, how do I get rid of it? You start to understand and accept it. It's a natural part of being a human being. But what is not a natural part is prolonged chronic stress. Right. So stress helps us grow. It helps us adapt. It helps us become stronger, faster. It helps us adapt to new situations. Helps us to learn new skill sets, new languages, move to a new country, get in a new relationship. It helps us to adapt to new environments. But when we experience prolonged stress for too long, it turns chronic. And when it turns chronic, it presents itself in many different ways: anxiety, depression, chronic pain, gut issues, skin issues, so many different ways that it can present itself. That's when it becomes unhealthy and harmful to us as human beings. And that's when we need to understand what stress we are experiencing and how to leverage the right type of stress and get rid of the unhealthy stress, because we can get rid of unhealthy stress and we can leverage the healthy stress to help us to grow and to become more resilient to handle stress in the future as well.
Yeah, 100% agree with you. And that's something I talk about a lot is, the hormetic effect in terms of hormesis, and using things like ice baths, using like exercise is a hormetic stress in the body. You are putting your body under a short-term stress to grow stronger. And like you mentioned, that's beautiful. That's how the human body and the human species has gotten this far, by being able to, use things like adrenaline, use things like cortisol to move through these acute stressors. But if you look at nature, there's not a lot of chronic stress going on in nature. It's the fight and flight, and then it's the rest. Fight and flight, rest. Fight and flight, rest. Whereas now the fight and flight is just stimulated by these computer screens, by the boss, by the spouse, by the, the traffic, all these little things that now activate those same pathways in the brain. And now, like you said, they're becoming chronic. And that's where we get into trouble. So I love that you made the distinction that it's not that stress is bad. Stress is arguably the most important thing for human evolution that has allowed us to get this far. But what can we do to help to mitigate that chronic stress?
We've got to start to learn to regulate ourselves. It has to start there. And it can be very hard to do that when we're already in that chronic state. So it then needs to be looked at from a slightly different angle, because when we're being preventative, right, and we're experiencing a bit of long-term stress, but it's still manageable, that's when we can be proactive about it. And things like hacking out our daily habits and daily routines, that can obviously really, really, really help us regulate very quickly. And it's a big, big return on investment of your time and effort. But when it becomes more long-term, more chronic, that's when we need to dig deeper and look at what is going on within the nervous system. What patterns have been ingrained already? How are you managing your own energy levels? And I'm talking energy levels from all angles here, to be able to sustain where you are, because usually that's an opportunity, right? Often people are using crutches like coffee and other medications and things like that, right? So that's an easy win, is when we can recognize what is that crutch, we can start to filter things out and actually bring in things that are a bit more resourceful and that are going to help to re-regulate ourselves. And the other thing is coming back to what is that root cause? At what point did this all begin? And we need to make sure we discharge any emotion that's attached to that, because we have to remember as well that, yes, stress is very physical, right? But emotions are physical too, right? We don't always think that. And just to go back to what John said earlier, when you ask people, how are you? Often they say, I'm stressed or I'm busy. They fail to give us an emotion. Right. And often what happens is that's a generalization, a lot of chronic stress is coming from a lot of charged up emotion coupled with a dysregulated nervous system. So when we can discharge that emotion that's been collected over time, and which we call stress compounding, then what we get to do is release that, which immediately turns our system, whether we've been in chronic stress or just short-term stress, it resets our system. And that's a beautiful thing. So when that happens, everything within us on a cellular level just starts to realign itself. And that's where we think the magic happens.
Definitely. And I'd just like to kind of bring it back to what Charlotte said about discharging those emotions. And there's something that we are very good at doing when we're children, but become very conditioned not doing when we're adults, which is that somatic response. Is when we're children and we don't like something, or we're hungry, or something happens, we physically discharge the emotion we're feeling, whether we throw a tantrum, we scream, we stomp our feet. But when we're adults, we're taught that we shouldn't do that in society. We shouldn't do that in public. We shouldn't discharge our emotions. We should bottle them in and keep them in. And I know this firsthand from growing up, as I have, is to keep everything in and don't show emotion. Don't show sadness. Don't show love. Don't show all this, because you're not supposed to. Okay, it's not right to show it in the workplace or in this situation or that situation. So we stop we stopped showing those emotions. We stopped actually using our somatic response. And that's when that emotional buildup comes in. So like Charlotte said, it comes to the point where we have such a compounded effect that all these emotions are just coming out in different ways when we're not really sure why and actually what we're feeling in the first place. So like you said, there's no chronic stress in the animal kingdom, because when animals have that fight or flight response, once they know they're safe, they get rid of it they usually shake or they do something to release that energy, that buildup that's been happening. And then they bring it back to that parasympathetic, that rest and digest state. But we've forgotten as adults how to do that. And we're taught to not do that. So we just store it. And then eventually at some point in life, it's going to come out in a very unhealthy way.
Absolutely. And I think that's a great way to recognize the innate intelligence that nature has. And when I was leading an after school program, spending time with kids, exactly like emotion. So what is emotion? Emotion is energy in motion. So if we're not allowing the energy to be in motion by being stagnant, by bottling it up, Well, it has to go somewhere. So it's going to go into our cells. It's going to go into our tissues. It's going to start causing damage at a cellular level. But when you sit back and observe, like if you have younger, I was going to say if you go to school and watch kids, but that sounds a little creepy. So if you have the opportunity to be hanging out with kids and sit back and observe them, like you mentioned, they get the most angry, the most sad you've ever seen a human being be for a minute, 2 minutes, and then it's gone, and then they're back to being happy and playing. Yeah. And they just purged out. They let that come over them, and then they let it out. And same thing you mentioned with animals. So that's something I love watching nature documentaries, because you watch a cheetah going full speed, trying to catch a gazelle. It doesn't do it. It doesn't say, hey, I'm going to go try that again, but only be able to go 50% and then just keep wasting my energy. It says, well, I didn't get this one. I'm going to go, sit in the shade and lay down and breathe and slow down for a couple hours. Then I'll go after it again. But we tend to have this mentality of more. And that's where we see in like these 40-hour work weeks, which oftentimes are a lot more, is people are working. They've done all these studies, like when they actually look at what's efficient in those work days, I think it ends up being like 2 to 2.5 hours a day of those 8-hour days. The rest is just people feel like they have to be there. So they're just kind of doing busy work and not accomplishing anything. But what if we broke our day up into, again, thinking of the 8-hour day as a stressor? What if we did 2 hours and then rested for half an hour, or rested for an hour, then did another 2 hours and recharge and had this, this exertion, recharge, which is a much more natural frequency. And I think that's something that when traveling, I was really had my eyes open when I was in, Asia traveling around, is like, it can be very exhausting to be traveling, but also recognizing, hey, I don't have many responsibilities right now. I can actually rest when I need to rest. So just kind of on that note, any closing thoughts on the stress topic? And then we'd love to just kind of dive into how you've experienced different lifestyle changes as you've been on this new wavelength in Thailand.
There's just one thing that I'd add to what you just said there. I want to just really speak to that, and that is something we speak to our clients a lot about, is about having these phases of acceleration and navigation. When we can start to recognize how much acceleration we need for the pace of our capacity as individuals, we then actually get to decide, okay, I'm going to be in go mode and be super productive for an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours, whatever. But then you know when to take your foot off the accelerator and just learn to navigate again, like you said, and rest. And I think if we can all have that level of awareness about ourselves and know when we need to switch on, either or, I think it would definitely help anybody that's listening to this that could be struggling or stressed, and it could really help you at least start to see some opportunities where you can start to alleviate that stress.
Love it. Jonathan, any closing thoughts on that before we dive into Thailand?
No, absolutely, completely agree 100% with what Charlotte said. I think it explains it all. Don't think I need to add any more to the pot. I think it just does what it says on the tin, really. I think the more, again, it comes back to awareness. The more we become aware, the better choices we can make.
You're just excited to talk about Thailand. I can see it. Thinking about stress all day long. It's like, no, talk to me about Thailand.
I love it. So it's just kind of give, a lot of my listeners have heard this before, but basically in 2017, I set out on my one-way ticket to Southeast Asia, and was in Sri Lanka for the first couple months there, living on my buddy's farm in the middle of nowhere, Sri Lanka. Tea farm, they had coconuts, bananas, all the fun stuff that you get in Southeast Asia. And then went to Thailand after being there for 2 months, and was in Thailand for about 6 weeks, and did a meditation retreat, started in Chiang Mai, went down to the Southern Islands and Bangkok, and kind of went to a lot of places. And one thing that I learned about myself in that period is, one, how resilient the human body is to change environments, change beds, where I thought, oh, I have to have the perfect bed, the perfect pillow all the time. But you don't get that when you're traveling around a new place and you're switching hostels or hotels every couple nights, and then changing food, changing all these different aspects. And that's a short-term stress in the body. So how have you found the transitions been, and how long have you been in Thailand now at this point?
I think this is about six weeks now.
Wow.
So we started in Phuket for 3 weeks, and now we're in Koh Samui at the moment. And yeah, it's like our whole kind of routine has been flipped upside down since we got here, because of the time zones and how we work with clients. We've gone from being morning workers to evening workers. So our whole routines have now kind of it's got flipped upside on their heads, and we have to think of come up with a new routine that worked for us. It took us a couple of weeks, and to figure it out, to find out what works, and to get into a new evening, working in the evening, and actually resting and doing our own thing in the morning instead of the other way around, which we used to.
What's the time zone difference between the UK and Thailand?
6 hours at the moment. It'll be 7 when the clocks go back in the UK at the end of October.
Yeah, the most challenging thing has been the time zones with our clients, because we work with people like in Dubai, in the US, in Cayman Islands. So it's like totally out of whack compared to obviously what we were doing before, like John said. But I think when we first arrived, we had a good week to just kind of rest and ease into it. But then we went full on like with our work, with moving, with all of these other things like changing island and things like that. Bearing in mind this island is only like an hour away from the other one, but that completely threw us off tilt, didn't it?
It did a bit.
And we got to a point where it was like, whoa, like we're bouncing off the walls at like 1 a.m, which is totally rare for us. And we're like sleeping in, and we're like, what's going on? And we just needed to find a new rhythm. And fortunately we've been able to do that again through just pausing, seeing what's working, make sure we've got the right kind of routines in place for both of us, because it's slightly different. And yeah, now I feel like we're finally getting settled.
Yeah, it's just finding again, like for both of us, starting with the one thing that gives us the biggest return of investment when it comes to our energy. And bringing us back into a more grounded, balanced state, because there's a lot of things that we do as part of our routine, and the one thing that we knew was not going to happen is we're going to just go back and put all of that straight back in, because it's not going to work. It's going to be overwhelming, and again adding to the stress. So we just thought, okay, what's the one thing that we enjoy doing and it's going to give us the biggest return of investment that we can start with, and then we'll go from there. And that's what we did. And now we found our routine. Now we found our way in terms of how we do things in the morning, our evening routines, and it's working well for us now, which is good.
I love that. Yeah. And something that I think is very interesting when traveling as well is, I sometimes think I have the perfect routine, perfect morning routine, perfect evening routine. But then when I go to travel, I realize, wait a second, all these things aren't possible because I need some of my little gadgets that I have at home. So I think it's a great reminder as we're going through these traveling experiences, what are the routines that I can utilize anywhere I go in the world? And for me, the biggest two I've really narrowed it down to are walking and cold showers. So I can do that just about anywhere I'm at, or cold exposure, whether it's going in the ocean. So what are some of the routines that maybe you were doing before that fell off, and some maybe the ones that stuck around, or maybe some new ones that you implemented?
Yeah, well, you're very lucky that you have access to cold water, because I've been missing ice baths so long now. I really want one. It's going to cost me a fortune to fill up a bath over here. Yeah, so one thing I would love is obviously an ice bath, but for me, breathing, breath work is key number one for me, and moving. So one thing I'm doing at the moment is something called quantum flow. So it's just kind of a combination of breath, movement, qigong, that just kind of helps me to ground and bring me back to a more kind of centered, resourceful state. So that's my go-to thing. And again, all you need is your body and your breath. That's it, which is good.
One of the things that we used to do before, even when we used to live in the Middle East, then we went back to the UK, we played tennis consistently for years. And since we've come here, because of some of the COVID restrictions, there's no access to tennis at this point. So that's been a big one for me, because I like to really enjoy my exercise. I'm quite competitive, so just kind of going for a run or whatever doesn't really quite tick the box for me anymore. I used to love it, but now not so much. So for me, I've obviously had to switch that out for something else. So now I've started to get into swimming again, and that's something I used to years ago, and that's actually really helped me to sleep better at night. Even though I'm swimming in the morning, I'm able to get into those deeper sleep cycles a lot better. And I know for sure that it's the swimming that's kind of ticked that box for me, because that's the only thing that I shifted first, and then I started to work back from there. And the other thing is qigong. I'm a big qigong fan, and yeah, that's kind of our things. And hydration, something so simple, that's been huge.
Yeah, well, what I love about swimming is it basically merges all the things you're just saying. You're practicing breath work while you're swimming, you're moving your body, and you're being very mindful to do it, because you can't have your phone on you when you're in the water. So that's one thing that I was a swimmer in high school. That was the sport that I was best at. And And ever since then, I've kind of lost touch with that. Just simply was like, I don't have a pool to swim in. I'm not close to the ocean. I can just go there on a regular basis. But this summer, there's a couple different trips I'm on where I was on a lake, and I was able to reconnect with that swimming. And like you mentioned, I slept like a baby. I forgot how great it is to just have that swimming movement, because I don't think I was aware in high school and about, the breath work. I was aware of like, oh, you got to do this type of breathing to be the most efficient. But being mindful of it now, I was saying, all right, how long can I hold my breath? All right, what if I breathe this way? And just started playing around with it, more of a fun meditation, as opposed to I just got to be the most efficient possible to win the race. But I think that, the more that we can basically move and breathe and be present is kind of what it comes down to for most practices, whether it's walking, whether it's Tai Chi, whether it's breath work. A lot of these come down to moving, breathing, and presence. And I think that's something that is absolutely free. It's completely abundant. You don't have to pay anything for most of those things. And I think that's something that, is really important for people to know, that, hey, no matter where you're at, you can be at the office, but you can get up, you can do some Tai Chi, you can focus on your breathing. You could be in Thailand, you could be in, Colombia, you could be anywhere in the world. That you can always use this body to help get you back to that centered state.
Absolutely. There's something we talk about often, like with our community, and that's kind of 8 core areas of wellness to focus on. And it's interesting that you say like those 3 things, because there's a big part of those within those 8. And we truly believe that when you take care of these 8 areas, that for sure we can share with you now if you like, that sense of flow just appears, and everything just gets that little bit easier. And I think then breathing literally just becomes easier. Life becomes easier because we've taken care of the most important things within us.
Yeah, let's dive into the 8. I want to hear. I know we talked about them last time, but some people listening might not have heard them.
Definitely. Well, obviously the one that we get clients to focus on the most, which gives the biggest return of investment and is also free, sleeping. Get your sleep hygiene and your quality of sleep on check, because that will affect every single other aspect of your wellness. In terms of obviously your thoughts, your emotions, how you feel physically, all these things have a direct effect on, based on sleep. So sleep is one of the most neglected areas of most people, because they think sleep less, work more, get more done, achieve more. Yes, but no, you need sleep. If you want to be productive, you want to be creative, you want to be on top of it, you want to basically be present as well, you've got to get good quality sleep, for sure.
Sleep is usually like the low-hanging fruit as well, because it's the one thing often people want in a way. And when they actually start to look at their sleep quality versus the quantity, when they start to look at how good is the sleep they're actually getting in the time that they have, and they start to really get on board with it, that's when they can get some real easy wins.
Well, on that sleep note, before we dive to the next one, I've been very jealous of the Oura Ring postings you guys have been posting. The mid to high 90s. I stopped using my Oura Ring for a while. I found that I was getting too attached to the data. So I've taken a little break from it. I just kept checking in, and I was like, this is becoming a distraction for me. But seeing your little sleep scores there, I was like, I don't know if I think you had like a 98 the other day. I was like, I don't know if I've ever had a 98. So I was like, you guys are doing something right. So on the topic of sleep, what are some of the tips and tricks that you're using? Because again, this is data that you're utilizing. This isn't some sort of like, hey, I slept better. Oh, how'd you sleep? Just a little bit better. There's concrete data. So what are you doing to optimize your sleep hygiene?
So one thing which I think has been a game changer for us both is having no alarm to wake up to. Now, I know that's not always ideal for everyone, but at the same time, you can train your body to wake up without an alarm, even by weaning yourself off an alarm. But that has really helped, because I think before, my alarm would always wake me out of my REM cycle.
Yes.
Right. So I wouldn't complete all of the sleep cycles that I needed to go through. So what I've noticed just from not setting an alarm, I feel like my sleep is complete.
Yeah, for sure. For me, I say again, it comes back down to breathing again. I like to do some form of meditation, or maybe just like a soundscape, I'll listen to in the background as I focus on calming my breathing down. Looking on a like 4 or 5 seconds in, 4 or 5 seconds out type of effect, just to really calm everything down, calm the nervous system down, and just start to help that promotion of melatonin as well to be able to get into a deeper sleep. But one thing we both found massively that works, we actually found this out when we're in Dubai, is when we switched around our dinners and lunch times. So we ate more at lunchtime, less at dinner time, and further away from sleep.
Yes.
And that made a huge difference, because what I found out, the closer I eat towards bed and the heavier the meal, my heart rate just goes through the roof. Right. And the one way I knew that was when using the Aura Ring. It used to jump up 5, 6, 7 beats per minute. And that would have a massive effect on my body, obviously my body heat, and how I got into those deep sleep cycles as well. So just by changing that when we eat and how much we eat, that made a big difference in the quality of the sleep we got as well.
Something else that any listeners can try, if they are particularly stressed, a good way to really kind of hack into sleep is using sleep tape as well. So it's basically just like a band-aid kind of material that kind of goes over your mouth. You can get it online.
It's like medical tape.
That's the one.
Yeah.
And yeah, you just wear that when you're sleeping, and immediately just helps you to breathe more fluidly, and it puts your body in that parasympathetic nervous system. So essentially, you're training your nervous system whilst you're asleep just by wearing it. So again, they don't even have to go to any effort except from put the tape on.
Exactly, it just forces you to do nasal breathing,
right,
which obviously brings you into that parasympathetic state. Because most of us, when we sleep, we tend to sleep open mouth, and we always wake up with a dry mouth, which is a good indication that we breathe too much through our mouth when we sleep, and that will activate our sympathetic nervous system when we're sleeping as well. So just a bit of tape over your mouth, done.
Well, here's the common theme I'm hearing from all those things you shared, is that we're getting back in tune with nature cycles, which, our metabolism is at its peak in the afternoon, or, our stress hormones are highest in the morning. So it's like, hey, how can we work with that? Because in nature, we wouldn't probably be out at 8 p.m. cooking over a fire to have dinner. We'd probably be getting ready to go to sleep because the sun would be down. So we'd be getting ready for sleep that way. And I don't know about in the UK, but in the US, dinner is typically the biggest meal. And that comes down from the work schedule that people are working. Oh, maybe you grab a bagel and coffee for breakfast, which that's a whole nother rant to go on about that. But, and then, lunch is like, oh, let me just get a quick, sandwich or some quick fast food, like something quick, easy. Like, it's not about the food. It's just about being quick so I can get back to work. And it's like, we get home from work. It's like, all right, now I can finally fuel my body with all the calories that I've been missing over the course of the day. And then people go to bed with a full stomach. They're not sleeping well. They wake up, have the coffee, and then becomes this cycle that we get stuck in. But when we look at the rhythm of nature, we're going to be calming our nervous system down at night anyway. We're not going to be having these bright fluorescent lights because it would be dark outside. Maybe we'd have a fire or something, candles, something small. So a lot of these things are very intuitive when we really think about it. So for me, I'm not too caught up on, is my lunch going to be the biggest meal? Breakfast is going to be the biggest meal? But basically the intention is just dinner's not the biggest meal. Dinner's not the biggest meal. And that for me works. I think there's a lot of, back and forth in the scientific community of like, what's better, lunch being bigger, breakfast being bigger. So usually when I tell people, like, don't worry too much about that, figure out what works for you, but just try to have dinner be the smaller meal. And I think that works really well for me.
Definitely. Sorry, I just think exactly what you said there. People need to stop being hung up on what the latest science shows and start to trust their own body.
Yes,
and start 100%. To trust themselves, because better than what science know. What a scientist who's done a generic study,
right?
Who doesn't know you? So trust your body. If it's not working because you feel like crap, you don't feel good. So if you eat something you don't feel good, that's a sign. Don't eat it, and vice versa. How you train, how you move, how you breathe, how you think. All these things, you just got to trust yourself that the answer. You just got to listen to yourself instead of what's out on social media.
Yeah, and a big thing on that, Jonathan, it's a great point. Is for me, I say that we're our own scientists. We are constantly experimenting, and you can get caught up in all these studies. And studies are great. They're great to give us some sort of direction, but recognizing, hey, what is the incentive of this? Because there's a lot of plant-based companies out there saying that meat is the worst thing ever, but it's like, well, they're trying to sell you grass or plant-based food. So yeah, of course they're gonna use studies, and then it's also like, hey, am I looking at a study that is using participants that are, say, 70-year-old women from Malaysia, or am I looking at guys in their late 20s, early 30s from Boston, Massachusetts. Like those are probably going to be two very different studies that are going to have very different results and may be more applicable to me or not. So when we read these headlines of like, oh, this is the best thing to do, and the best example I can always give is with eggs. At one point, we're told eggs are bad. And then we said egg yolks are bad. Oh, but egg whites are okay. Then we find out, wait a second, actually the egg yolk is better. And meanwhile, the farmer's just like, I just been eating the egg the whole time, the whole egg. So I think it's important to know, like, science is great, but take it with a grain of salt. Be very mindful of what the sample size is, what the sample population is. There's so many different factors that we can use that as a guiding post. Say, hey, maybe I'm going to try that for myself, but not getting so attached to say, hey, that is law, that is absolute truth, because part of the scientific process is changing over time.
Absolutely. One of the 4 phases we work with our clients is the discovery phase, and it is all about observing and helping them to realize that they are the only sample that matters when it comes to all of this information. That's the only thing that matters. You're so unique, as we all are, and it's just so important that we start to tap into that intuition. Right? Intuition, that inner teacher, literally, like we have there. It's just about being open to hearing what it has to say.
Absolutely.
Exactly. Your body's sending you signals all the time. You just need to listen. Stop.
Yes. Well, and that's the biggest thing is, something we were talking about earlier with the root cause, is that oftentimes the symptom is not actually what's causing the issue. For me, I hold a lot of tension in my trap, but if I actually focus on massaging my lats and my triceps and my low back and my obliques, basically everything but the trap actually feels a lot better. So sometimes it's recognizing, hey, what is the root cause of this? And a lot of times that stems from posture. If I'm sitting too much that day, if I'm hunched over my computer, it's like, hey, massaging the trap, that's going to relieve some pain temporarily, but it's a matter of like, all right, how can I change my daily routine to not allow that symptom to occur, getting to the root cause. And I know we've gone off on a complete different tangent, which is great, but I'd love to come back to the 8 pillars that you focus on, because we got into one and then went off on a good riff.
No, so
it's all relative.
Exactly, it's all relative. It really connects. So obviously the first one we mentioned was sleep. Second one is breathing. And we touched on that one quite a bit. For me, all I want to say on that one is just the breathing is just the CEO of your body. It controls every system in your body.
I like that. CEO of your body. I've never heard that. Cool.
Yeah, so by controlling your breathing, you can make things better, you can make things worse, just by changing your breathing.
Totally. So the next one is movement. And again, we've kind of touched on this one earlier. When we honor our body in the way nature intends, it helps naturally for that stress to flow out of our system just easily and effortlessly.
Definitely, just moving mindfully, moving with purpose. And that just does the job. It gives your body what it wants.
And life is movement. I think that's an important piece, is that, our cells are constantly moving. There's nothing in our body that is stagnant, or if it is, it's probably creating some sort of dysfunction or dis-ease in the body, but our body is constantly moving, constantly cycling blood. So if we can think of, in my opinion, the more we can incorporate movement, not movement necessarily being exercise, but the more we can incorporate movement, whether that be Tai Chi, walking, even just like stretching, restorative yoga, anything that is movement. Most of us live so sedentary that, in my opinion, the more we can incorporate movement, the more we are allowing life to move through us and allow that vitality to, really manifest itself.
Yeah, 100%. I remember so I used to work in like fitness facilities, and so we was always moving around in the gym. You're always moving constantly on your feet. And then when we could become self-employed in the very beginning, when we were setting up our businesses, we went the other way. We're like on the computer often. We seeking so much. Like, whoa, what is this? Like this doesn't feel right. It doesn't feel natural. And that was a big wake-up call to make sure. And again, I love what you said there. It's about movement, not exercise. That is so crucial, because so many people get so hung up on, did you go to the gym this week? Did you work out? And they give themselves a hard time about it. They get more stressed, right? And the cycle just goes on. But the movement is the key, 100%.
Definitely.
Absolutely. Let's keep diving in.
Okay. So next one we've got is nutrition and hydration. We've also touched on this a little bit. Again, very important to feed your body the right stuff. And like I always like to tell people, there's no such thing as good or bad. And there's no good food, there's no bad food. It's whatever serves you and what is resourceful for you. Because again, some people don't do well on certain healthy, quote unquote, healthy foods. Some people have intolerance to eggs, which are good for you in terms of a nutritional value. Some people don't do well with bananas or with broccoli. So the so-called healthy foods, it's all about what you respond to. And that's, again, listening to your body and seeing what you're taking in. Does it feel good? Does it make you feel energized? Do you feel great? Do you feel light? Or do you feel lethargic? Do you feel bloated? Do you feel in pain? Do you feel heavy? You got to listen to those signals and then start to adapt how you eat to do that. Because I don't do well with kind of like, I love pizza. I don't do well with pizza, but I love it. I'll still eat it, but very, very rarely.
I do well with pizza.
Yeah.
It drives me crazy. not too much though. Okay, so the next one is energy, right? I think we can all agree energy is one of our greatest assets, and you know, when we perform at our best, it's usually because we're flowing with our energy. And this comes into account, of course, from like the nutrition, the movement, all of those things are going to help to that vitality flow, but it also includes things like who you're surrounding yourself with. And what are you doing with your time? Where's your creativity? And all of those things come into play, because when we start to recognize, well, where is my energy at? And we start to question these things, only then can we start to actually come up with resourceful ways in which to ignite it. And that energy is that zest of life, right? Like you said at the very beginning, we've been doing all the right things, but if you're lifeless and you don't feel energized by life, then you know there's a red flag, a big red flag, and that needs some serious attention.
Love it.
I don't think.
No, you've done a good job with that one.
Yeah, you nailed that.
Definitely. So the next one goes quality of thinking. So this one, very important, as obviously our self-talk determines how we feel. What's going on in our head determines how we're going to feel, and how we're going to feel is going to determine how we show up and how we present ourselves physically. So it's important to understand what's going on in our head and how to be able to think more resourcefully and deal with those thoughts that aren't resourceful. And it's not about not thinking. As we said, many people go, I need to stop thinking. I can't stop thinking. You're never going to stop thinking.
Well, they fall into the trap of only positive thinking,
yeah,
right, which can also as toxic. So when we're talking about quality of thinking, we need to go all the way back to our conditioning and start to understand, well, why do I believe what I believe? Why do I think and feel this way about myself or the environment around me and the community around me? Right, because like those things are informing our life experiences. And when we actually start to be able to observe those thoughts and see what's kind of under the hood, when we get to do that, then we get to intervene and start to reshape that quality of thinking to one that actually serves us to where we want to go. One of the most common things that we hear so often is when people talk about what it is they don't want. Right, all of the things that they don't want. It's like you ask them, what do you want? And they give you all the big list of all the things they don't want. Right. And that is just a big clue as to quality of thinking needs some attention. So anybody listening to this, just always check yourself. Next time somebody asks you, what do you want? Even if it's something as simple as like, what do you want for dinner? Chances are you're probably going to rule out lots of things before you decide. Right, and it's like, oh, I don't want pizza, I don't want curry, I don't want this, I don't want that, and then you finally come to a conclusion. That's just a sign that that's your natural habitual way of thinking. And in that instance, like, what do you want for dinner? It's not a big deal. But when you're thinking about where it is you want to go in life, and you keep putting these pictures of all the things you don't want in front of you, you're going to come up with more and more roadblocks and obstacles, and that's just not going to help you get there.
No.
Yeah, and honestly, it's the more that we focus on these things we don't want, the more power we give them, and the more that those, like you said, those obstacles are going to keep coming up. And my mentor Paul Chek, always says the answer to every prayer is always yes. So if you're saying, I don't want to be sick, I don't want to be sick, I don't want to be sick, you're basically reinforcing. Like, your brain doesn't hear the don't part. All it hears is the sick, 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 and then you're creating that thought. And I think that's a big thing that is, very challenging to watch with the media right now. Is all about don't get sick, don't get sick. It's like, what about being healthy? What can we do to be healthier and be more robust and be more vital? So it's the shift from, fear and scarcity to shifting into that I'm actually in control and I have an abundance of opportunities and ways to go about life. So it's really a quality of thinking, like you said. So how can we shift our mindset? And I love the challenge you gave to the listeners here is, hey, if you're going about something and your first instinct is, I don't want this, I don't want that. How can we just, first of all, it's not very efficient going through all these things we don't want. How can we shift that to be, hey, what do I want? What do I like? Well, I like doing this. Okay, that's cool. And it'd be cool if I had that too, and start focusing on the piece that we do want. And then we're putting together this puzzle of the things that we do want instead of giving all this power and mental thought to all the things we don't want. And a lot of that is unlearning, letting go. I think you mentioned about, how we were conditioned, a lot of those things. And that comes with being honest with ourselves. We got to look ourselves in the mirror and say, hey, this is where I'm at, but I don't want to be here anymore. I want to be there. I want to focus on getting to this point and not focusing on the baggage from the past. And that's a conversation that takes awareness and takes, being completely honest with ourselves. That's not always easy.
Absolutely. It's interesting you say that, because with that example of focusing obviously what you want instead of what you don't want, it throws up another problem that seems quite common out there, is that people don't know what they want. Right? And they're like, but I don't know what I want. And then they're like, well, what is my purpose? What should I be doing? And then that's when they're looking outside of themselves. And it brings us really nicely into the next one of the 8, which is emotions. Right? When we follow the feelings, it will lead us where we want to go. Right? If we allow ourselves to feel and listen to those signals of what's making us feel good or not so good, when we start to learn from them and accept them and let them go sometimes as well, like when they need to go, then that's something that really helps us to be able to actually move forwards as well. And that stops that build up, that stress compounding that we mentioned at the beginning as well. It's huge.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Definitely. And the last one we got for our 8 is action taken. And this is important. It's okay to become aware of everything that's going on and to listen to yourself. But if you're not taking action to do something about it, again, you're staying exactly where you are. You're making no difference. And it's actually worse, because now and you're not taking action. That's even worse, because you know better now. You're more aware. And it's important that we take that action in life, to take those little steps forward every single day to be able to get what we want. Because if you say, I want this, okay, great. What are you doing about it? I'm going to think about it and hope it comes to me. That's not going to work. Right. It's like, I want this. Okay, so what do I need to get it? What do I need to do to get it? I need to maybe wake up a bit early. I've got to maybe start doing meditation, or maybe I've got to change my sleep routine, or I've got to do something different at work, or I've got to do this, or I've got to do that. And you start putting a plan in place and you take action on that plan and you start getting to where you want to be. But without action, everything's just a dream.
100%. Well, it's funny. I was talking with one of my friends yesterday, and she was saying, you can sit in front of a vision board and do manifestation meditations all day, and that's cool. But that's just the stepping stone. That's setting the vision. Like we talked about earlier, thinking about these things is great. But when we get caught in this cycle of thinking without action, that's where positive becomes a detriment. And then we get in our head, and like you said, we can be thinking of, I should be doing this, I should be doing that. And then we end up doing nothing. And it's a whole paralysis by analysis, just overanalyze everything. And it's great to create your vision, make that clear. That's very important, because if you're just taking action, with a blindfold on, you're not going to probably end up where you want to be. So yes, we want to set the vision. We want to think about what we want, but then it comes down to taking the action. And I love that that's the capstone on the 8 is you got to do something about it. You can read about hydration, you can read about movement, but if you're reading about movement and reading about becoming a bodybuilder, but I've never lifted a weight, well, I'm going to say the guy who's been doing bodybuilding for 10 years probably knows a little bit more, even though he's never read a book about it. So it comes down to action. I think that's a beautiful capstone on the 8. I love it.
There's one thing I'd love to add to that as well, is that we tend to go through these 3 phases on our journey, right? And I think we can all relate to this somehow. Is like, at one point we're kind of consumed, right? We're consumed by our life. We're like in it. We're in our problems. We're in our experiences. And like you say, it's almost like being a blindfold on, and we're almost like just kind of fighting fires through life kind of situation. Then we move often into like an observer phase, and we start to realize, a lot of people call this like awakening, right? But if we start to observe, we're like, oh, why did I do that? or they start to observe more problems as a result of what it is they're doing. They start to realize that they're the common factor in maybe some of the things that they're experiencing. So they move from this like being consumed mode into an observation mode. And that observation mode is incredibly powerful. Like we said earlier, awareness is so key for anybody who wants to have changes in their health and in their life in general. But when we get stuck there, like you said, we can go on a bit of a spiral there as well. So that means it becomes so paramount that we move into the third mode, which is about being a creator. Because when we can then step out into, okay, well, I'm observing, this is what I'm learning, this is what I'm experiencing, which is fantastic. Okay, so like you said, what are we going to do about it? What can we create from here? Well, how can we create the best relationships? How can we create the best experience in our careers, in our work, with our loved ones? Like, what does that look like? And when you're coming from a place of creation, that's when that flow tends to happen. And that's such a beautiful thing, because that's when what we've noticed as patterns with our clients and in our own journeys too, is that when we get to that state of kind of creation, it starts to have a bigger ripple effect. And we start to then reach and spread more people, and you start to notice that, you know, family just becomes happier, and then the friends of the family become happier, and now all of a sudden there's a whole neighborhood that's happy, and then all of a sudden there's this ripple happening wider and wider. And I think that's what really spurs our mission on, isn't it?
Definitely, for sure. It's like when people start to realize that when they are healthy and well, they can become a force for good, and it's about working on themselves to be able to step out and help other people. And that's where that kind of that purpose comes from, that sense of fulfillment as well. It's not just about, great, I'm good now. It's like, no one gets to that point. When you get to that level of awareness and you work on yourself, you don't just stop and go, great, I'm good, I'm going to carry on with my life. You start to think, how can I now make a bigger impact? What can I do to help others? And that's the magic of the creator phase, because you're always constantly wanting to do more and more and more and grow from that and help other people grow within that as well.
It's coming from a healthy foundation.
Right.
That's the beauty of it.
And I think that can sound overwhelming to people, especially when we're in this paradigm of, hey, I'm going to work for 40 years and then retire and then just be done. You know, I'm done working on stuff, done working on myself. I can just kind of check out and hit cruise control. But a lot of people find, you know, that's why a lot of guys, especially who have been working for 40 years, retire, they end up getting a part-time job after they retire just because they needed some sort of purpose to do. So I think it can sound overwhelming to people, say, oh man, I'm going to be working on myself and helping other people for the rest of my life. Like, man, what if I don't want to do that? But as you mentioned, once we get to this place of, hey, I feel great, it's a natural overflow of, I want to share this with other people. It's not I have to get on and do this podcast so I can talk about things that will help other people. It's like, no, this is an extension of me feeling good. Things that have worked for me have worked for you both. And now we have the opportunity to share that with other people. And I think I love the ripple effect knowledge. It's something I often talk about, because the way I look at it is, let's say that, you know, X amount of people listen to this podcast and 99% of them say, I'm never going to do any of that stuff those people say. But if there's that 1% of people that listen and say, hey, wow, I didn't realize how I'm focusing on the negatives. I didn't realize that I could be doing Tai Chi every morning instead of checking my phone. I didn't realize that I could be, you know, breathing before bed. And now their life changes. It's not always about reaching the maximum amount of people. It's about reaching the right people. And that's what the ripple effect is, hey, if one person makes a change from this episode, to me, that's worth it. You know, obviously I'd prefer it to be hundreds of thousands or hundreds of thousands or millions of people making changes from this episode. But at the end of the day, it's the ripple, and that ripple is going to start small, but eventually it's going to expand out. And once the ripple is huge, it's hard to even see where the ripple started from. And at that point, it doesn't even matter. It's the change has happened, the change is going. And I know that you guys are making some major changes in the world. So I want to thank you for doing that. And I also love the 8 pillars you talk about. I often talk about the 6 foundation principles in mind, which is moving, thinking, breathing, nutrition, hydration, and sleep. So basically you've got those 6 plus a few more. So we're pretty spot on with the alignment there. But I know that you both have an event coming up pretty soon. We'd just love to have you, share about that and where people can follow along, learn more, and stay connected with you both in your journey.
Yeah, awesome. So the event that you refer to there is called Become a Force for Good. So quite in line with what we've just been talking about. And basically, we've got 7 incredible speakers who are going to be there, who are speaking in and around the topics on how to have the impact you wish you could, how to make a difference just as you are. So anybody that might have been listening to what we're talking about and it feels overwhelming, that's going to be a huge topic that I think you'll absolutely love. There's so many, I won't list them all now, but if you do want to find out more, all you need to do is follow us over at Wellness Theory on Instagram or thewellnesstheory.com, and they'll find everything they need. And also on there, they can also find a scorecard on those 8 areas that we've just spoken about as well. Those 8 core practices that we all need to be well. They'll be able to not only see where they are and what they're doing really well, they get to see how they can develop and improve any areas, and they'll also get some practical and tactical videos there too to help them along the way, all for completely free.
Definitely. I just want to touch in there with the events. If those people listening thinking that this sounds all overwhelming and how can they actually start to make a difference, just by attending the event, you will make a difference already, because all the proceeds from the event go to a variety of really good causes that are in line with the 2030 global goals as well. So literally their attendance already has a huge impact on some very important causes out there at the moment.
And if you can't make that event day, we will, and especially with the time zones and things, we will be making the recording available after as well for anybody who can't make it on the day, and they'll get all the same perks as everybody else.
Beautiful. Well, Jonathan, Charlotte, thank you for being yourselves and sharing your messages here today. And I'm excited to see the ripple effects that come out from this episode here. Any closing things you'd like to leave with our listeners?
You first? Okay. For me, I would say in terms of closing, I think just trust yourself. Like, there's so much information out there, so much conflicting information out there, and it can be overwhelming. And I think you just got to take a few breaths, take a step back out of all the chaos, and then just trust that you have the answer. You just need to start to listen to what your body's telling you, listen to what you're telling yourself, and it's okay to ask for help and advice, but first of all, find out what questions you want to ask first. Step back and go, where am I right now? And how am I feeling? How am I doing? Am I where I want to be? Okay. And if not, do you know where you want to be? And if you don't know, okay, then you can go out and ask the questions. You can go and seek out help and advice for people who can help you find the question. But first, you just need to be able to believe and trust in your own ability to figure it out. And then if you can't, then you know, okay, I'm at this point now where I can go out and I can ask the right questions to people to see who is a right fit for me, who can maybe help guide me to where I want to be.
I love it.
From my side, I would just add to that is that we all have the resource we need within us, and it's just about learning to access that. And I think a great starting point for that, for anybody who's listening, is to ask yourself a question: is who am I being right now? And who do I want to be? Because we talked a lot in this episode about all the things you could do. And a lot of people, I'm sure that are listening, are like, oh, but my life is already so jam-packed. How can I possibly do more? How do I fit this in? And I think it's just very important to honor that. Honor that you've got all these things going on in your world, but just ask yourself, who am I going to be when I show up today in my busy life? Who am I going to be? Am I going to be somebody that's taking care of my quality of thinking? Am I going to be the person that's energized and cares about that, how I'm leaving others? Like, just asking that question can really start to help us create and co-create a beautiful identity that can also have that ripple effect as well, without even really too much effort.
I love it. Well, everybody listening, go make that ripple effect. Start by following them. And again, if you didn't catch the where to find those things, I will put all the links in the description box here so you can check that out. I'd love for you to follow them on their Wellness Theory account. Check out what they're doing, check out their events, and follow along with the journey. And if you found like this was helpful to you, this episode in any way, shape, or form, would really love for you to share this with a friend and just keep that ripple effect going. And download the free ebooks I have on my website, learn about growing your own food, learn about stress and sleep, and just start there. Start with the simple things. It doesn't have to be anything crazy. Give them a follow, show up to their event, download a free ebook. Like, these are little things that share the podcast. And it doesn't have to always be these crazy actions of, oh, you got to go hike Mount Everest. You got to go do these crazy feats. Start small, start where you're at, and keep it going. That's the biggest thing, is just being consistent, keep showing up. So, everybody listening, I appreciate your support. I appreciate you tuning in. Charlotte and Jonathan, thank you for being you, my friends.
Thank you for having us, and thank you for the incredible work that you do as well. You're certainly creating that ripple effect as well in your way.
Thank you very much. Well, everybody listening, have the best day ever. Talk to you soon.